What is crack-a-lackin', fellow thermonuclear AFers? I am Dan Favale coming at you with my certified fantabulous co-host, Mr. Grant Hughes. We are on to our fourth and final installment of one goal or thing to watch for, or that we want to see, or that we are monitoring for every NBA team to close out the regular season. If you have missed the first three podcasts, go check them out right now. You know what? Re-download them, like them, comment on YouTube, even if you've already done that, share them. They are up. They are live. This is the second part of the Western Conference. Definitely listen to the first part of the Western Conference at least. We did the Dallas Mavericks through the Memphis Grizzlies because we go alphabetically, since Grant and I are fucking geniuses around this part who know the alphabet now. We are going to begin today with the Minnesota Timberwolves. But first, the question that you should all want to know the answer to. Grant, how the F are you? This is a family podcast. I actually think I already said fuck.
You definitely did last time. Let's see. I'm excited and also kind of concerned because last time we agreed a lot and we did not discuss what our goals for each team were going to be beforehand. And I'm a little concerned that maybe our brains have become one, and that makes me uncomfortable. But hey, maybe we'll be completely different this time. We'll see.
Look, we're about to disagree for the first time. The idea of just our brains melding together gives me such joy.
Does it? I don't know if you want what's going on up here. You should be a little concerned about.
Hey, the way you can handle trolls in the comments and just let it flip right off you, I'll take it.
Okay.
And look, if I could grow a beard like you could, is that part of the mind thing?
I don't know. The brain's a complicated thing. Maybe if we had 2 brains worth of brain power, we could answer questions like that. But so far we don't. But we'll see.
People, randos on YouTube commenting on this intro saying, what is Frankie Muniz and Lionel Messi talking about right now?
Well, I don't know. Both those guys have done pretty well.
By the way, I think a podcast hosted by Frankie Muniz and Lionel Messi would probably do pretty well.
Did you know that Frankie Muniz is really into car racing? He professionally?
No, but I did see him driving a tricked out car in that movie Agent Cody Banks that he was in with Hilary Duff. So does that count?
How do you think he got into it? That clearly was the genesis of it. We are starting with the Minnesota Timberwolves. Do you want to go first? Because we're going to, not in addition, like last time to the alphabet, we're going to juggle who gives their goal for the team first. We'll alternate it.
Yes, I believe you went first last time. So okay. I should go first now. So
Sounds
for
good.
The Minnesota Timberwolves, I actually have 2. But they're one of them is so basic that it's just kind of like what. So I'll start there. Continue to get Jaden McDaniels to take more 3-pointers.
Okay.
He has been up. He's shooting them a little bit better over the past couple games, but he's been able to get them up at over 5 attempts per game over the past 7 or whatever it is. He's only at 3.5 for the season, so that's a big difference. You need him to open up the floor, help out with the turnover issues on your offense, the driving lane, so that Anthony Edwards, who's freaking spectacular, but so he doesn't need to work as hard. He's been uneven all year on the offensive end. I talked a couple weeks ago with Kyle Tyge from the Dane Moore NBA show and Flagrant Hal about this. And he's not all the way back yet, but I like that the 3-point volume is there almost by force. You need that because maybe they'll start to go in at a higher clip, or just to help. Defenses will treat you differently if you're taking them. Teams will be less inclined to throw their big on Jaden McDaniels. You know what? Even if you're shooting 31%, that's a victory. The other thing, and this is kind of a continuation thing as well, but not so much. We don't know when Cat is coming back from the meniscus. His reevaluation period is basically the last day of the regular season, I believe. I know fans were like, oh, we're going to have a week off before the playoffs. This means he could return. Okay, maybe, but also maybe not, because he had this repaired. Normally everyone's different. I'm not a doctor. I'll make that clear. But the reparations of the meniscus usually take longer to return from than if you had just got it completely removed. He had it repaired. Right. So I'm just saying, channel your inner small ball for certain stretches. And by what I mean with that is no Kyle Anderson at the 4 with a big moving forward. That's it. I don't want to see it. I am done. You want to go into a lineup. And I think that my lineup of choice for this would be more of Conley, Edwards, your favorite guy, Gilgeous-Alexander Walker, Jaden McDaniels at the 4, or if you want to call Naw that, whatever. And then Gobert or Naz Reid. And I think this lineup, the Naz Reid as the lone big minutes have not been great this year. Mm-hmm. I think if you're going to play those players with him for most of that, it could improve. I'm just thinking you need to kind of be better prepared for life without Cat. And look, they've navigated it fine for the most part, but find out more of that information. And I also think, as someone who is, for any Timberwolves fans listening, and I hope there are many of you out there, their defense is going to hold up. I'm actually not worried about the dual big setup, but just in case you get into matchups where even if Towns was healthy, it makes more sense to go with one big plus 4 wings / guards, get more information on that. And so the lineup that I was just outlining, like when you're playing those 4, Anthony Edwards, Mike Conley, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and Jaden McDaniels with one big, there's not a ton of sample size with that. And so let's continue, because you almost, not that you kind of have to, but like extrapolate the sample size while it's a borderline necessity without Cat. So you have a better idea of how to deploy it during the postseason with or without Karl-Anthony Towns involved.
Yeah, I'm into it. So I went a little bit of a different direction, and you already, Dan, if you had to guess on the Timberwolves roster which player I would like make it a point to try to talk about in my goal, you did say his name.
I already know who it is, and I said on this on the podcast I recorded solo, I hope Grant never hears this because I hate the idea of him listening to me talk. But I talked about Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and I picked him as Minnesota's most improved player. 1, because it was correct, but 2, I said it was because I knew that it would make you happy.
Because he's just my guy. So what I think the Minnesota Timberwolves should make a goal. So broad strokes.
Trade Anthony Edwards, rebuild around Nickeil. Is this what?
Yeah, no, you see what you can get for him, because I'm just not comfortable building around the face of the league. Offense is the problem, obviously. Like if you pulled, I don't know, anybody that's been paying attention at all this year, you might get some different niche versions of like, oh, the turnovers are an issue, or oh, like it's the offense. The defense, I totally agree, is going to hold up. I don't know that I'd even heard any skepticism about it, but if there is any of it out there, it's crazy.
They're calling Naz Reid a defensive liability, and it's just like, like in what context? Where if he's the only big you're playing for 48 minutes a game, then maybe. Otherwise, no.
Yeah, and also somebody's got to be your 5th best defender, and it's just because the Wolves are almost always going to have like 4 other good ones. So
they have 3 all defense candidates. I like the Nickeil Alexander-Walker minute stuff, but like they basically use him to guard 4 positions. So
yeah. So what I would like to, in an effort to juice the offense, now this isn't something I think that they necessarily want to like. It's too brazen to be like, we're going to go to this in the playoffs, like as our default. Like that's not going to happen. But let me just say, Mike Conley on the floor, the Wolves offense is better than with him off. They have like a 114 offensive rating when Conley plays, 112 with him off. But capital B, capital U, capital T exclamation point. When Conley is off the floor and the backcourt is Anthony Edwards and Alexander Walker, the offensive rating is 120.1. Small samples. But if you have those 2 guys as your backcourt, just, not all the time, but if you're really looking for
huge
athleticism, size, just dynamic players, way more switchability. Like if you're switching 1 through 4, no problem. If you have Alexander Walker, Edwards, McDaniels, like, I don't know, Cat, whatever, like he can.
Yeah. I was going to ask off rip, do you happen to know what the most used lineup is with those 2 as the backcourt?
I don't.
I'm going to look it up while you're vamping. I'm just
cool.
I'm genuinely curious.
No, so it to me, like, I understand the Mike Conley as steward angle and like pick and roll operator. If you're going to have Gobert, present some offensive value, I think Conley is definitely someone that helps facilitate that. But ultimately, like, the clearest way this team is going to fail in the postseason, if it fails, will be just its inability to score consistently. And so, like, yeah, Conley's got to play. He's a net positive for them offensively, but you got to explore Alexander Walker and Edwards together just to see, like, can we just overwhelm teams physically? Can we be so disruptive with them defensively that we create a bunch of transition opportunities too? And we just get out and like, there's so many different ways to manufacture points, and just putting a second athletic, rangy, 2-way guy who also, by the way, is shooting like 45% from 3 in March in Alexander Walker. Like there's worse options if you're trying to, like, find some kind of magic formula for, I don't know, 15 minutes a night, just maybe 15 crazy chaotic minutes where they get up and down and Walker, Alexander Walker hits some threes. Like, I don't know, maybe that gets your offensive rating up to like league average, and that's going to hold up if your defense is by far the best in the league. So I want to see some experimentation with no Conley and this new like monster backcourt.
Yeah, I what they've done a lot of is not have Jaden McDaniels in some of those lineups. I assume because you want to stagger, like have two of your best defenders on the court at all times. But the most used lineup is with Reed, Towns, and Kyle Anderson. That's only a plus 1.1 per 100 possessions. The defense has been shaky during those minutes. The second most used is basically just subbing in. It's the starting five, but with Nickeil Alexander-Walker in for Conley. That's only a plus 3.3. The moneymaker, and I never would have guessed this, Gobert, Naz Reid, Kyle Anderson with those two in the backcourt. 131.
What are the offensive ratings though?
131.1 for that lineup.
All right, do that. let's try that. Why not?
That or 156.8 for Reed, Towns, and then Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Anthony Edwards, and Jaden McDaniels. That is so. I think so. If we go Reed, McDaniels, Alexander-Walker, and Edwards, that's just flat out your four best perimeter defenders on the court with Karl-Anthony Towns. I could understand why that would be an incredible, like
it has some appeal to me. And like, we're trying to fix the offense, but like maybe that's just so much better defensively. You replace Conley, who, is going to be picked on size wise more often than not, like with Alexander Walker, who's just going to guard, like you said, 1 through 4 if you need him to. I don't know. Maybe that works. If you're ready to move on, let's go to the New Orleans Pelicans. And I have them first here. So I feel like it's kind of obvious, and they've kind of done it to some extent, but the Brandon Ingram injury is just something that I think only reinforces the idea that the goal for the Pelicans needs to be just lean all the way into Point Zion and just start tailoring everything to, like, that's how we're going to play. And like, if you want to get really, over the line about it, like maybe that means you start looking at no centers, and you got to have Trey Murphy out there with Herb and McCollum and, like, I don't know, Najee Marshall or whatever else, like to fully space the floor, to fully unleash him. And you kind of figure out the rest. Not saying that particular look is something that the Pelicans need to do, but like, it seems clear to me that Point Zion is just what needs to happen. He needs to be even higher usage than he's been. So just this is a ridiculous number to me. So in terms of points created by players driving, isolating, or posting up, and when they touch the paint, now this is talking their own buckets and assisted baskets resulting from those situations, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Luka are 1 and 2. Zion's number 3. And that's not in total points created in those situations. So like, those two other guys, their primacy to their offenses are so far and away like greater than Zion's has been all year, that like, I don't have it broken down in like per minute or per possession, but like Zion is just clearly someone that you've got to just give him the ball and like figure out how to build the rest of the lineup and rotation around him. That's always kind of been true, but it seems more obvious to me, especially like this is over the last month where he's been kind of ramping up. This 67.5% true shooting in March. That's the best of any month. He's actually rebounding, which is cool too. 7.2 boards this past month, which is still like seems low for someone with his athletic ability, but whatever.
He does spend time next to Jonas Valanciunas, though.
That's true. That's like the rebound vacuum is on the floor with him a lot. But I feel like Zion has kind of gotten back to, and look, card carrying Zion can stay healthy for a full season and really matter. Skeptic, I'll admit to it, but he's starting to look more to me like someone who in a playoff series might just be like, he might put a team in a position where it's like, we don't have an answer. And specifically, like the Suns don't have anything for him. The Kings don't have anything for him. The Thunder don't have anything for him. Like the Thunder, beat him, but Zion had 10 assists and 10 free throw attempts in that game. And like, I just think there's a scenario where he just wins you a playoff series against the right matchup because there's no solution. And you got to lean into like building yourself around that. Now the Pelicans are super deep. That's their true strength. But if you're really trying to win, I think you got to just start embracing what this is. And like, this could create fit issues long-term. Like, does Ingram really, like, what's he do here if this is how you're going to build your team? Because like someone like Trey Murphy would make more sense in the same role because he's going to space the floor way deeper, is going to slash harder, is not going to slow things down. Do we go with no center? Like I said, lot of like follow-up questions, but that the goal I think should just be to fully embrace that, like, we're built around Zion. He has the ball all the time.
Mine kind of steps on the toes of this, although one is completely different because I have two, but it's they need to sustain this identity. And what you're talking about, the Zion stuff, they seem to get away from what works offensively too often. A lot of that is because of injuries. But let's look at that Thunder game that they lose.
Mhm.
Why is Zion barely touching the ball in the fourth quarter when he's on the floor? And it's like when your points, like you just give him the ball, like that should just be the default. And they get away. And again, sometimes it's when you've gotten away from point Zion, a lot of the time it's he got injured. We had to get away from it. He comes back. We can't just go right back to it.
Mhm.
However, they've done a good job now optimizing the personnel that's there. Maybe it's not ideal to point Zion because you get into some functional awkwardness with Brandon Ingram and Zion. They did such a good job, those two, of balancing it out. I want to see when Brandon Ingram comes back, assuming he comes back. Let's hope he comes back. That version of Brandon Ingram made so much sense next to Zion Williamson. It's like it's not even funny. There was so before January 31st, 44.3% of Brandon Ingram's buckets were coming off assists. After January 31st, up until his injury, I was at like 56%. That's a massive uptick.
And that's the right direction for him, I think. For the best version of this team, I think that is the right direction for his shot, his bucket distribution to be moving. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I just think he's been so much more plug and play, and it's been on both ends. And I don't think I would have to dig into the data or even just go back and watch specific possessions. There's not like a two-man game, or I would say a super prevalent one between Zion and Ingram. I at least don't get that sense when I watch them when they were healthy. But like Brandon Ingram is instead, he's finding Zion just with the ball, and then he'll go in space to the corner or just attack faster off his catches from Zion Williamson. And then it's spilling over to the defensive end where you mentioned, do they go with no center? You know what? He's, for the most part, like kind of striking this invaluable balance when it comes to his closeouts, or is he going to go and defend a lot of big man? Like, he's handling big man responsibilities, I would call it. So they need to keep that. I'm using Brandon Ingram as sort of just like a barometer for it, because that's where the thorniness really comes in when you're looking at the surrounding personnel. Now, because Ingram's injured, I also have this one. Their defense relative to their personnel is overachieved. We both agree, even though we got destroyed in the comment section, we both agree their defense is surreal, but they seem to do like the really hard stuff right, where it's, good luck screening them, or they'll close out from like 80 feet away. But it's, you can force the ball out of a star's or a primary ball handler's hands, and then it's too easy for them to get it back, where you almost feel like your primal job is done right there. And you've seen it against the Thunder. I feel like we've seen it at points against what was the other team I was going to use? I feel like we've seen it against the Clippers, but it's not like the Clippers I don't worry about as much, but it feels like they can relax, or it's just like once you force the ball out of a star's hands, or if you're not fighting over screens, you're just not as engaged with it. You're playing a little bit too soft or a little bit too far off. Some of these guys, it was really, I want to make it clear, it was like, that was preposterous what they did against Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, where they were just, Antonio Daniels said on the Pelicans broadcast, they were in a constant state of retreat. And that's what it feels like after they do the hard stuff right, when it comes to sometimes getting these primary scorers the ball back. That's something I'd like to see them work on, but it's really just it was a different way of rephrasing what you were talking about. But there's a real thing to where they've grappled with identity consistency on the offensive end. And I know part of it is injuries, but as you can see, when it comes to point Zion, if Zion is healthy, injuries, like he supersedes all of that if he's the one who is healthy. It doesn't matter who's on the court. Yeah. Point Zion is possible. And to deviate from that in any way, shape, or form just doesn't make any sense to me.
I agree. Yeah. All right. We kind of disagreed. We kind of didn't say the same thing. So that's progress.
We are on to the Oklahoma City Thunder, who... So I initially I want to ask you this question before I get into mine. Who is among the three teams contending for first place in the West? Who is first place most valuable or should be viewed as most important to?
Well, I mean, you could make the home court advantage case for Denver, but I feel like they're going to beat anybody anywhere. So I guess maybe because they're so young, I think the Thunder might benefit most from just playing more games at home. So I guess I'd say Thunder.
That was basically my argument, was get the 1 seed, kind of how I started off to approach this, because I'm I don't want to say that I think experience is overrated, but there's so many variables here because like Mark Daigneault just plays like 12 plus guys whenever he wants. Does that almost do you a disadvantage in the playoffs where you don't know what a super narrowed down rotation looks like? And some of your players aren't used to logging a ton of minutes in the first place. How does that impact you? So remove one of the variables from the equation by getting first place. I didn't want to be the thing by saying my goal is for them to get the number 1 seed just because that's so basic. The other things is let's make sure Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is healthy. He had to sit that game against the Rockets that they lost on Wednesday night. The other thing is can we get is the Gordon Hayward thing happening? He's been kind of valuable as a ball mover, but can you get him to actually be more aggressive as a scorer, as a shooter, as a driver? Does he have anything left there? And then the other thing, and this is a sustain version. Grant, since the All-Star break, by the way, the other thing is give Isaiah Joe a longer leash to find himself. I'm tired of seeing these. I don't care that he's on the smaller end. I don't want to see these games where he's only getting like 14 minutes or whatever it is. Run more stuff for him when he's on the court, get him going. But really, they are 6th in defensive rebounding percentage since the All-Star break, which is a big deal for them because people's biggest qualm has been they're too small and they're too slight, even when you're looking at their size. So I went back and I was watching a lot of defensive rebounding possessions because that's just so much fun to do. You can look at a lot of the bigs have seen their defensive rebounding rate skyrocket since the All-Star break. Jalen Williams, Chet Holmgren even. And you've seen some stuff from the wings and the guards go up a little bit. But the wings and the guards, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Josh Giddey, even J-Dub, they've done such a good job of boxing out where it always feels like there's 2 of them within the vicinity of a Chet Holmgren or a Jalen Williams to make sure that, no, these rebounds aren't uncontested, but they're easier to get to against bigger, burlier front courts. That needs to continue to be a focus because make sure you're going to end possessions that way. And it might allow you to stick with either 1, not shortening your rotation, or 2, just kind of obliviating this whole argument that the Thunder are too small and slight to contend for a title right now. And they're among the teams where I just have so few notes for because I do believe in them just so genuinely and authentically. But you can kind of poke and prod and quibble with smaller areas of what they're doing. And so I look to that where it's, can you get to a point where you're comfortable shortening your rotation and not playing matchups as much, or just, not emptying the bench, but going to 10 plus guys? Or can you get to a point where, Chet Holmgren can play 38 minutes per game? Those are real questions to have. And I've been very impressed with what we've seen on the defensive glass, just the collective effort they've shown. Can you maintain that?
So I am going to hit on a little bit. Well, I'll leave the rebounding stuff a little bit alone because my goal for them is really, it's still to me, is to figure out how to contend with size, and particularly dynamic size. Because I don't know if you saw much of the Milwaukee game. They got nothing for Giannis. They don't, and who does really, right? But it's he better
Doc
than
Rivers
anyone
has some stuff up his sleeve, I think.
Yeah, right. You need a saboteur to handle it. But he's a nightmare for them. They won't see him unless they make the finals. But it's just as illustrative of, and Zion, I think, is another guy that is just they don't, you're asking Lou Dort or Jalen Williams to guard 4s a lot. And it's just they're competing, and Dort is as hard to move as any guy his size is in the league. It's just the rebounding is still an issue. I think you touched on it. They're 28th in offensive rebound rate, 29th and defensive rebound rate. They're 29th in second chance points. Opponents get
6th in defensive rebounding since the All-Star break.
Right. So it's been improved, but it's so I wasn't going to harp just on the rebounding but it is indicative of they've had to figure out what to do to compensate for just a lack of size and really bulk. The trade-off, I understand it. They just have never, they didn't go get the big that everybody, they didn't go get Andre Drummond or whatever.
Whoa, Bismack Biyombo is there.
Yeah, Bismack Biyombo was there. But so what was the other stat that was really telling? They allow the 3rd most second chance points in the league. So that's more rebounding stuff. But I don't know if it means you sort of steer further into the skid. You highlighted some interesting stuff I wasn't aware of about how they're doing better at boxing out, gang rebounding, that kind of thing.
Are you about to suggest Lou Dort at the 5? Because I'm all for it.
I know you are. There's no such thing as a lineup too small. But I think you could obviously like Chet's a center, but also not, because I still just think he thinks and moves like a guard, especially on offense, with a center's shot blocking prowess, but much better mobility. I wonder if you just like their transition numbers are good, but particularly off live rebounds, they don't really push it. I wonder if like the workaround for we're always going to be smaller and slighter than, well, not always, but there are going to be teams where we just like cannot compete size wise. Maybe you just like really lean into let's run every time. Let's Indiana Pacers this. So like more hit ahead passes, higher transition frequency in general, particularly off live boards. Just see like if there are points to be had there that will offset the second chance points you give up, or the times that like you just have no way to keep a Giannis or whoever from getting 2 and 3, cracks at it inside, because like, they're probably going to have to play, a Timberwolves front line that's going to be really big. And Anthony Edwards is a really forceful driver among guards. And maybe you're going to have to see some guy named Jokic, who is more than happy to just like set up shop and put you in the basket if that's what the defense is designed to like make him realize is the correct play. So I think, if the goal is to like figure out how to contend with size, like the real solution would be like, I don't know, have bigger players. You can't do that now. It's too late. You had that chance. You didn't take it. Maybe that was the right decision. But that to me still is the clear issue, unless you're going to say inexperience or whatever. They got to figure out how to contend with teams that are going to be bigger than them, because that's going to be like pretty much everybody.
The running stuff is fascinating because I think that's probably counterintuitive to having Shai Gilgeous-Alexander as the like driver of your offense. Now, that being said, I think even when you look at a lot of the lineups they use without him, they could still stand to run more. And so it's how do you build the perfect, let's say SGA's off the court, you're still going up against some size. We've seen a lot of Chet with SGA off the court. And so I'm like, if you were to build the lineup that I think would run and not be overly small, I'd probably go with Case and Wallace, J-Dub, of course, because of course, Aaron Wiggins, shot of adrenaline. And then I would go with, can you play Kenrich Williams and Chet Holmgren together? And does that allow you to get out and run without giving up too much size, where it's always Josh Giddey at the 4 in that scenario? And then you're playing 5 out. All those guys can shoot. And Josh Giddey's been hitting his threes for the moment. That's a really interesting thing that you bring up, because you probably could do it a little bit more with Shai on the court, but I would look to what you're saying. That's probably something you need to focus on during the SGA on the bench minutes.
Yeah, I would say too, like we haven't really talked about this, but I think SGA, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I know more than once in stuff I've written recently, I've referenced like, the way that officiating has changed since the points of emphasis were handed down from on high. His free throw attempts per 100 possessions are significantly down from their peak. Like he is definitely someone that benefited a lot from the way offense was officiated early. And like, if the reason he's so effective is like he can just from a standstill put you in a compromised position and draw fouls or score. And if that's a little bit harder to do now, and you combine like the new officiating with the playoffs, the whistles kind of just tend to go away a little bit more too. Maybe running helps address that too, because like, if SGA creating something from nothing was OKC superpower, because he's just like, even now there's still nobody harder to stay in front of. But if that's going to be a little less effective and you're trying to solve the lack of size issue, maybe running is like now doubly important, because the half court like fallback you had of SGA will get fouled, like worst case scenario. If that's not going to happen, if that's happening 10 times, if he's getting 10 free throw attempts a game instead of like 12 or 14 in a play, like, I don't know, that's another reason to think about picking it up. Also, like, who doesn't want to play faster? That's like every team that comes into the season, like, we're going to play faster. So let's just do it. We
are on to your Phoenix Suns.
All right. I would be surprised if you don't at least touch on this somehow. You got to figure out the fourth quarter, fellas. Like the numbers have been out there forever. I will just list some of them. We can talk about the why. I would love it if you had some whys. I was trying to find out, looking deeper into the like play type data and, just how is this happening?
I have some anecdotal whys. So,
oh, good. I better than anything, because those are better points of discussion than numbers, which I'm about to give you some of. In the fourth quarter, the Suns are 30th in net rating, minus 14.1 points per 100 possessions in the fourth quarter. That's hard. That's hard to do. They're 30th in turnover rate. They are 30th in defensive rebound rate. They're 27th, hallelujah, in offensive rebound rate. 26th in true shooting percentage. Only the Portland Trailblazers have a worse assist to turnover ratio in the fourth quarter. I wonder, I guess I do have a sort of like solution instead of just pointing out problems. This is the information I couldn't find. I wonder what would happen if you just spammed Devin Booker, Kevin Durant ball screen actions. Like, I don't care which direction they go. Maybe those just get switched. But just and space the floor with Brad Beal and Grayson Allen, and guys can't come off of them. So, like, I don't know. It doesn't obviously, like, Frank Vogel has probably thought of this, I hope. But he definitely has been criticized for running some, like, 2014 ass offenses. So I just, like, if you're of the mind that, which I kind of am, that, fourth quarters of the regular season are about in close games are about as close as you get to approximating what the playoffs look and feel like, and the kind of adjustments you have to make and the intensity and blah, blah, blah. Like, if you suck at fourth quarters to this extent for this long, it's just like, I don't know, man. That's a huge issue. So I don't know. Figure it out. Just use your two best players in 2-man action and don't do anything else for the rest of the year and see if that works. It can't be worse. So you might as well try that.
Oh, yeah, mine was streamline the fourth quarter offense. And what I meant by that is, so I'm outside a few things. So it's basically what you said. I wrote extensively. One, Bradley Beal said this, they overpass in the fourth quarters. And like, we've seen some games where they won't, but sometimes it might be just as simple as this team is shot so poorly. They shoot so well on wide open jumpers for the first 3 quarters, and then they just shoot terribly on wide open jumpers during the fourth quarters. Now, so he talked about overpassing. You mentioned the turnover stuff, and I had written about this, and then Gerald Bourguet of Phoenix, I think it's Phoenix.com or Phoenix Sports, wrote a better one, which, one, I want to make clear I never would have been able to replicate that, but two, boy, do I miss being able to spend that much time writing or talking about one team. He looked at every single turnover the Suns had. So go check that out. I retweeted it on my Twitter profile. But this is one of the numbers that I had beforehand, and it's still held true. I think maybe they're dead last in, you already mentioned this one, but they have the third most bad pass turnovers overall. And I think a big portion of that, Gerald dug deeper into what Kevin Durant was doing. And you mentioned kind of spamming 2-man actions with Kevin Durant and Devin Booker, maybe even Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal. Zach Lowe has kind of harped on that as well. The other thing is just like create any sort of advantage situation for KD where it's what Zach Lowe is bemoaned, which was different from yours. You kind of went a different direction, was if he's not on the ball, he's not doing anything enough. And then if he's on the ball, you're asking him to just create too much from scratch, where it's like, send him a ball screen to break up these traps, or don't have him do something away from the ball so he's not suffering from these blitzes or these double teams. They're not doing that enough. And I think as we've seen Kevin Durant get older, even kind of definitely post Achilles, not going to get to the rim as much. And it's just like when he's in ISOs, even if he's running pick and rolls, like he's going to turn the ball over more off of pressure. Yes. And you need to figure out a way to get him out of that. And do you know what the answer is? I'm not saying take the ball out of his hands. Don't have him start with it as much then. And so, like, is there a way to do something like that where it's Kevin Durant needs to be used as more of the screener? Or can you let's have Devin Booker, Bradley Beal screen for the other, and then we actually get into more kickouts for Kevin Durant? Maybe he's not standing in the corner. Maybe he's lifting out from the corner more often. So anecdotally, just of the crunch time games and possessions I've seen from the Suns, that is what I would like to see more. And it's not, there's the element of, there's probably still a lack of familiarity because I believe the big three is still played in fewer than 30 fourth quarters together this season. That's problematic. But like, I'm not, and you're not asking them to reinvent the wheel. This is just stuff that I feel like could be pretty basically or easily implemented, because first of all, we're not smart enough to suggest stuff that would take time to implement. Like, this feels like on the fly. And the other thing that bugs me is we've seen it for very just small flickers and flashes that it can work when you do that. And my final number here that supports the anecdote, Kevin Durant in the clutch this season, Grant, 38% on twos, 32% on threes.
So that's insane. Can we just talk about how, because like some of the numbers, it's not just the shooting, it's not just the defense, it's not just the rebounding, it's not just the bad pass, it's all of it. is there like, are we just overlooking the fact that like, I don't know, having to rely on for a lot of the year, two of, or even one of the three stars to do so much early in games, it's just a fatigue thing. Like, what if, all this, remember the splits, how we would trot them out every year about how Luka Doncic is like quarter by quarter, it would just get worse and worse and worse because he was getting tired, like, because he's being asked to do everything. I think maybe it's like, I'm sure there's more to it, but I think we're kind of overlooking the simplest explanation of like the way this team is built demands so much of, if you had all three of those guys for the whole year, maybe this is different. But I think like Durant for a minute was like leading the league in minutes, and like Booker was playing a ton, and like Beal just kept missing time. But like, I wonder if that's as simple as it is. Like they just like can't sustain the workload and the responsibility they have. And like all these other guys, these minimum guys that everyone was over the moon about, like, guess what? They're not going to be reliable to like carry you in a fourth quarter of a close game.
Got this.
Yeah, right. That might be it.
With Durant specifically, because of the injuries that were dealt with Bradley Beal and then also Devin Booker, particularly earlier in the season, that would be, I feel like, a legitimate factor in that, is just if you're digging into it. But I do think, despite everyone, probably not having a more conventional floor general has hurt them. I just refuse to believe when you have Devin Booker and even Bradley Beal on your team, who's done a better job, I'll call it point guarding lately. I just refuse to believe that is I'm not going to say that the way the roster's built is a feature and that this isn't a bug, but like, it's not. If you had, I've seen people like, man, I'm just dumping Cam. Like, no, campaign wasn't going to make a difference here. No. And had you gotten TJ McConnell, even, although who's apparently the best isolation scorer in the history of basketball, but like, I don't know that he would have materially changed this team's issues. Maybe he would, don't get me wrong. But then, so you're removing Grayson Allen shooting from the court, and that's it, because you're not going to, because now you have McConnell, Booker, Beal, Durant, and then Nurkic, or I guess of like one of the Eubanks, or if you want to go Bol on that, or you can play Grayson Allen with Durant at the 5. I don't know if Durant at the 5 is really going to be something that's certain matchups, sure, but that's not something you want to talk about putting too much on his shoulders. He's had too much on his shoulders defensively for a lot of this season too.
Have I given you my theory on why TJ McConnell is so effective as an isolation scorer?
Let me hear it.
Every shot he takes, his defender is split second thinking, it's 2024. He's not taking that fucking shot. That's a terrible shot. And then he takes it, because it'll be like a dead sprint into like a pull up, like on the way up 8-foot jumper. Like no one shoots.
Makes me nervous about the structural stability of his ankles when he does stuff like that. It looks
like high speed
like
stuff.
It should hurt.
He wants the shots that every defense has been told now, like, oh yeah, we concede that, like force him into the 8-foot leaning, like barely getting it over your fingertips jumper. So he's mastered the element of surprise. So that's what it is.
Very quick aside before we get to my Portland Trailblazers. So while you were talking before, my phone notification started going off. Someone's spamming our YouTube comments with just negative stuff. What is it about us that elicits? Because I've seen bigger podcasts and accounts, and maybe I'm not journeying deep enough into the comments. It's all this positivity or jokes or being like, what is it about us that makes people, I feel like, harp on the negative of what we say more than it, like a lot of these other bigger podcasts? I'm at like a loss.
It's probably we're not giving enough TJ McConnell shot analysis. I think that's
let's change our niche moving forward to that. And with that, though, we will move on to my Portland Trailblazers. So this is kind of like in the vein of the Memphis Grizzlies, where they're not as banged up, but you're kind of just in try shit mode.
Yep.
So I have a handful of things I would like for them to try. Are you ready?
I've got a few myself, so let's hear yours.
I'm going to start with the most throwaway and probably not productive, and then work my way up to what I think could be productive.
Okay.
Just take more threes. There's no reason for this team to be in the bottom 10 of 3-point frequency the entire year. You want to split it up before the All-Star break, post All-Star break. It's very similar. You need to open up. DeAndre Ayton has had like a better closing kick because I guess he has a mattress now. That was just, my God. Anyway, the snow stuff actually wasn't funny. I totally understand how that, like, I didn't understand people making jokes about that. The mattress thing, dude, you're on a 9-figure contract.
The mattress thing makes the snow thing like it validated everybody was like, really, with the snow thing? Because then the mattress thing follows and it's like, well, it's kind of you, isn't it? It's not it's
I
not
don't
the
want to talk about the snow thing. It was, but I just that mattress thing was, I thought, absolutely absurd. But
Yep.
it opens the floor more for him, and then Scoot Henderson, who has shown flashes. Excuse me. You know what I've seen the most flashes from him? When there's an open floor for him to
Yeah.
navigate through. Let's just chuck more threes. I recognize you don't have the personnel to do that and be efficient. I'm going to tell you one thing. I don't fucking care. Just take more threes. I have two more. They're a little bit more nitty gritty here. I know they're playing Ryan Rupert more. It's not enough. Let's see if the 3-point shooting is real, if the defensive length can be this disruptive that we've seen, and then test the limits, the boundaries of what he can do defensively. Is this, oh, he kind of needs to defend slider players, wings at the point of attack, or, oh no, he can scale up because there's been some nice possessions with him there. The other thing I would like to see them try, and they're still not trying it, and it kind of, I understand. Well, no, I don't understand why, but like Tamani Kamaro at the 5 just seems like, why aren't we trying that? Is it because we don't want to infringe upon the reps for like Duop Reith and DeAndre Ayton? You're at the point in the season where it's like, infringe away, my dudes. And they've played 57 possessions with Kamaro at the 5. And I understand that changes schematically what he can do defensively. But like, if you're going to play him, like just neutralize his non-shooting factor. He is such a non-factor when it comes to being on the perimeter, where what happens if you don't want to play him at the 5, can we get the lineups then where you feel comfortable using him to set some screens? Because like he can really finish and maybe do some stuff inside the arc, and just, he's such a monster defensively. It wouldn't shock me if you put him at the 5 and it's like, oh no, look at, like, we've seen him cover some bigs to begin with in the sense, although they have him covering a lot of just kind of the star, what you would call them, wings, or even guards. So I understand the reticence there, but like, we are at the kind of just try shit portion of the season. And so I would like to see, I think of all the things that I've listed, I'm obsessed with Rupert, so I want to see him play more, but like, let's try and get Kamara at the 5. And you have enough perimeter flyers or players where it's like, oh, Jabari Walker's on the bench. Like, we don't really care at this point. So you can, like, hey, you know what? You put Kamara at the 5, that opens more minutes up for Rupert on the perimeter.
Yeah, Portland is like a lot of teams, but really for the Blazers are in the like no bad ideas in a brainstorm portion of their season. Which is what you're saying. Just like, I don't know, see if this is going to work.
Speaking of that, by the way, very quick, I have zero idea. I'll say zero. I have zero grasp on Chauncey Billups, the head coach, still. And we're wrapping up year 3.
Yeah.
Right?
No. Yeah. No, I agree. Well, it's like, how could you really? Like, because every year ends kind of the same. Well, either you're shutting guys down or you're in this situation. Anyway, I kind of similar thing, but to me, I don't know, it's oversimplified a little bit. I think you just need to get as much information on what it is that Scoot Henderson needs to like be the best version of the player you need him to be. And so that goes to lineups, that goes to like trying different play styles, like different player combinations, all that stuff. So the problem is like you kind of get some conflicting information. So it's like the lineups with him and Malcolm Brogdon are like mostly positive. So, okay, maybe what he needs for at least now is like a real secondary facilitator next to him, right? Like someone like Simons isn't really that. Brogdon is just like the quintessential like combo guy, like has some point guard instincts, but like isn't really a true, just someone like that. Those lineups are okay. Oh, okay. But then what about like, well, maybe Reith's spacing at the 5, like maybe that works. And maybe that unlocks your ability to play like really like nasty wing defenders. And so with Scoot, so like you shield him defensively, you give him spacing to go to work on offense. Reith can help him. But then if you play Reith, Scoot, and Tybal and Kamara together, the offense just like falls off a cliff. And so those numbers are all terrible. We aren't going to find out very much of anything about
Brogdon. What is he dealing with? The elbow thing? And like, we don't know when he's coming back.
Right. And also Shaedon Sharpe probably not coming back. He hasn't played since January. So you're not going to get.
He was coming back.
I don't know. I just look. Why? Like, I mean, I guess for this purpose, it would be great to know what a larger sample of him, Simons, and Scoot together would look like. But what I do think is most interesting and kind of blew me away lineups with Ayton, Scoot, and Simons together are actually only minus 0.3 per 100 possessions. So like which is great for a team as bad as the Blazers have been. So it kind of circles all the way back to like, well, yeah, no shit.
Ah,
Pick and roll center that Scoot can like use to, get his own looks or feed somebody near the basket with an incredible movement, high volume 3-point shooter and Simons next to him. Like that works pretty well for a point guard. Like, okay. I just like that's where I came all the way back around to. I don't know. We need to figure out as the Blazers, because Scoot Henderson has had a wildly disappointing rookie season. Some of that's been injury, some of that's the situation, some of that's just him underperforming expectations. He's the most important figure in the franchise by a factor of like a million. You need to figure out what's going to help him be most successful, what types of players he needs around him. So if you only learn one thing the rest of the year, like that's kind of got to be it, I think. So, but unfortunately, it seems like the obvious answer is right there.
we are on to your Sacramento Kings. Anger your best friends.
No. Well, I mean, you could just make the defense the issue, but I don't know what the goal is, because the goal should have been to solve it by getting better defensive players at some point over the last couple of years. So I focused on, and this was my issue, I don't know, a couple weeks ago when we were doing the East with them. And this is before Kevin Huerter went down. How are you juggling the like Malik Monk, Keon Ellis, Davion Mitchell, shooting guard / third guard / whatever minutes to like maximize what all those guys can do? Because Mitchell still has real value. He's been overtaken by Ellis because Ellis actually is bigger, longer, really dynamic defensively. And I think is shooting like 39% from three. It's low volume. He's getting up about
44% for March alone.
Yeah, he's getting up like 6 per 36, which is good. But if he could get up more, then it's like I don't know why you need Davion Mitchell, other than the fact that like your guard depth is just is diminished.
Yeah, and Davion is definitely stronger than
for sure, but he's so small. Like he's truly a one position defender, and like I just think again we've seen it already. I feel like I've brought this up a million times, but like if Mitchell is in the corner, no one guards him. And so like his contributions as a disruptive on-ball defender against point guards have to be so massive to offset just the Kings having to either hope he makes a couple threes or just play 4-on-5 on the other end. So Mitchell, I feel like, is kind of lowest in the pecking order there. And do you want to mess around with Monk's minutes? Because he's been so good all year in the like closing role, and you can use him to be the primary facilitator when De'Aaron Fox is off the floor. Like, I don't know how you want to tweak that. Maybe you just leave it alone and say, Ellis, like, guess what? You're playing like 30 minutes a night now, which he's been pretty close to lately. So I think that's just kind of a dynamic they need to get sorted out, because even if like Huerter is kind of like out of favor, I think for sure. Like you can, the game I went to the other day was like, every time he missed, there were audible groans, and there was a lot of like heckling from Kings fans toward Kevin Huerter. So there's some frustration there. His like 2-man game with Sabonis and all the givebacks and handoffs and stuff, that still matters. Like that's still a real part of what makes the Kings offense good when it's at its best. But if he's going to be hurt or diminished or continue to play this poorly, then like, I don't know, you just got to figure out what you're going to do with that rotation at the guard spots.
Yeah, that's a good one. I also, the stuff, I don't really have anything to add to that other than I think this might step on a little bit of the toes of what you were saying. I really think they need to now more than ever with Kevin Huerter out, streamline life for Keegan Murray at both ends of the floor. And so let's start and I think he's been great this year. And I'm going to repeat a stat I had on the other podcast for his defense, but offensively, he's shooting 32.4% from three since the start of February. He cannot hit from the corners. And that's been like kind of the tail of his story all year. He's at like 39% above the break or over 38%. And then he's like in the low 30s from both corners. I think he might even be like, it's from the right or the left corner. I can't remember, like sub 29%. A lot of his stuff, he's still doing mostly 0 dribble threes. A lot of his looks are classified as open or wide open, but they're also in the same vein as Kevin Huerter. They all feel like they're off balance, or it's like coming after a lot of work. And then when I look at what Keegan Murray is doing defensively, so now let's go to the defensive end of the floor. last year, Grant, there were like 28% of his possessions came guarding one of the two highest usage players on the other team. That number is shot above 50% this year. And
He
so
has
part of me
to.
is kind of, yeah, it had to. And by the way, he's held up really well. And so does he have the lift to get off what they might be wide open threes? I would still say they're not now the stuff he's missing from the corners. Yeah. A lot of the times they're not off balance. They're these standstills, but can you simplify any of that? And so the way to do that on offense for me would be, can you get to even more minutes where it's Monk, no Sabonis, and Keegan Murray's on the court? I understand what Murray does with Sabonis. That's important. But like Malik Monk is more of a drive and kick player rather than we need the off-ball guy to work a lot to get to the handoffs for Sabonis. The other thing, though, when you mentioned with Keon Ellis is, well, how can you best fit the Keon Ellis, Keegan Murray lineup so that, okay, Keon Ellis is going to handle a lot of these defensive assignments. That will make life easier for Keegan Murray to where he might be dealing. Yeah, he'll still have a hard cover, but he'll be dealing with more low man stuff, which, by the way, another stat I'll regurgitate just because I found it fascinating. He ranks in the top 30th, Keegan, in the top 30 of shots contested at the rim this year. Not wild.
Again, he has to. Like somebody has to do it.
So can you figure out a way to streamline life for him? And that gets harder now without Kevin Huerter out. And so my focus is and I think the way to do, I don't know how they're going to simplify life for him offensively, is like the stuff I mentioned with Monk. Okay, that's fine, but you don't want to detach him from Sabonis too much. And so I come back to the defensive end and it's okay. Well, then how do you best build your Keon Ellis, Keegan Murray lineups? And then it gets even harder because the most used one with them is Fox, Ellis, Murray, Barnes, and Sabonis naturally. And that's been outscored by 4.2 points per 100 possessions with a 106 offensive rating. And so to have two of your three most valuable offensive players on the court in Sabonis and Fox, Monk's not in this lineup naturally, to be that poor on offense. And when you start to dig into kind of the shooting numbers for that group, it's all right. They're shooting 30% from three. That feels a little anomalous, but when you look at the struggles that Keegan Murray's had in some of those situations, you kind of get it.
Yeah.
I don't know what the answer is my point here, but you probably need to get, especially now without Huerter, more creative with your lineups. And even the Trey Lyles injury probably looms pretty large here. And so like, maybe it's, do we try more of Sabonis, Murray, Keon Ellis, and Monk? And then it's, do you have Fox out in that regard? Or do you go with Davion Mitchell there to try and cater to the defense a little bit more? You need to find a way to do a better job of making life simpler on at least one end of the floor for Keegan Murray moving forward to ensure that he doesn't get, I don't want to say worse come playoff time, but doesn't deal with a lot of the same struggles we saw from him last year in the playoffs.
Do you think if everybody's available, what is your preferred, what five do you want to see out there? It's obviously Fox. It's obviously Sabonis. It's obviously Murray. Is it Barnes and Ellis? Are they your fourth and fifth guys? Or I guess you have to have Monk
and Ellis, even though you're so small.
You got to have Monk, right?
I'm just looking at, it's like, how do you not have Monk with the year that he's having and just how valuable he is as like that passer out of his drives? And so
then is it Ellis or Barnes?
In theory for defense, I'd probably rather have Ellis, but that lineup, so basically small. The starters plus Monk instead, because Ellis is a starter now instead of Barnes. They've only played, this is such a small sample, 67 possessions, but they're minus 19.4 with an 84 offensive rating.
I mean, that's a better offensive team than 84. I mean, that's
right. I think that's the lineup I want to see more from, but I understand why we just want Monk with Barnes and Murray and Sabonis and Fox, and that's the one that we just need to. But I'm trying to figure out a way, because I think that Ellis is important to simplifying Murray's life defensively. That's my starting point. It's okay. It's Ellis and Murray. Build your way out from there. You're restricted though, because it needs to be Sabonis and Fox, and so it's who's the best fifth.
It's simultaneously awesome that Ellis is this good, and terrifying that he's now this important to the Kings.
Right.
Like that was not one you could see coming earlier this year. We got the Spurs. We got the Spurs next. I don't know what to do with this. There's two ways to go. Am I leading off or are you leading off? I can't remember now.
Oh wait, I think I'm supposed to be leading off. I apologize.
Okay, I'm gonna have very little to add, but you'll probably just say what I was gonna say too. So go ahead.
Oh, Willie. So can we see? can we just see Dominic Barlow play with Victor Wembanyama to see what happens?
Yeah.
Is that what you had?
No, well, one of the ways was going to be the two things I had. We could just kick this back and forth because everything goes back to Wemby and like what does he need? It's kind of like the Scoot thing, but like more profound.
Mm-hmm.
So the two ways to go are like who should play next to him in the front court, because it ain't Zach Collins. That's pretty clear now. Although that seemed like a good idea at the time. And Barlow is one of the guys. It's like, well, he's energetic and he's going to run and he's physical and all this other stuff. So the front court combo or partner or whatever is one. And then like the answer is not there probably, but it's like what facilitator / point guard makes the most sense, if any sense, on the current roster. Like the Blake Wesleys and the Branhams and the Champagnes and like, I don't know, let's go back to Point Sohan, I guess. Like those are the two bookends of like what guard should be with him and what big guy should be with him. And I don't have the answer, and the Spurs don't either, but you should mess around as much as possible late here to try to figure it out.
Yeah, and that's where I'm kind of at now. I think the issue with Dominic Barlow is he's averaging 0.8 3-pointers per 36 minutes, 3-point attempts. That's not, great, but he has range. So you explore that, But then also, because of the way Victor Wembanyama has been shooting the three, it's probably, you can get away from the fact, well, he needs to play with a stretch big. And it's like, and also Dominic Barlow's not really a big, he's kind of like, maybe he's a pure 4, but he slides his feet really well on the defensive end. You already mentioned he'll run the floor, has some good feel as a passer or knowing when to attack in space. I just want to see more of him. Do you know how many possessions, though, the Spurs have played with Trey Jones, Dominic Barlow, Victor Wembanyama, and no other big on the court?
God. I mean, Barlow was in the G League for a lot of the year, so it can't be that high. Also, by the way, before I answer, he did shoot more threes in the G League. I think last I looked, he was in like the low 30s percent-wise, which is like
36.4% in the G League and then 88.9% from the charity stripe. So those are good harbingers.
It's way better than I remembered. I'm going to say those three have played together without another big for like fewer than 10 possessions.
18 possessions.
Okay, I was close.
That's not enough. And you know what? The problem is like it's been at that number for like ever since Dominic Barlow's been converted. So like I initially looked at that number once he got converted, and it was 14, I think.
So there's
and
not,
now it's been ratcheted up.
They're right. Just
and
not
so
trying.
That lends itself to what you were. I mean, we've mentioned a couple times with other teams on the podcast is just try this stuff. And the other thing that I think they could stand to try is like, well, let's dispatch with this notion that long term anyway, that one of Keldon Johnson or Jeremy Sohan needs to start. And so like we've seen Keldon Johnson been moved to the bench. Jeremy Sohan has stayed in the starting 5. What kind of happens if you just have Keldon Johnson and Jeremy Sohan coming off the bench?
I mean, it would mean you had starter quality players ahead of them, which is like Keldon Johnson.
Is the point. But try it anyway to see what does that do for bench units.
Sure. Yeah, that's fine. I think, I was going to ask you, I think of you as the preeminent Devin Vassell supporter. You've pulled me over to your side more than once, and I think I mostly agree. How do you feel about Devin Vassell's progress this season or lack of it?
What do you mean? All right.
Not worried about it? I feel like he was a breakout pick and it didn't happen.
What is it that's actually concerning? The fact that he's developed into more of a 3-level scorer?
Don't you feel like the sentiment is that Devin Vassell has been a little disappointing this year? Maybe I'm just misreading the room.
If you're looking for his leap as sort of a playmaker, can he be the Devin Booker or Chris Middleton level reader? Sure. But I would also point to the lineups they've put him in have not been conducive for the most part to exploring that, at least from the games that I have seen. I'm not trying to make that the end all be all.
Because all the Spurs players are bad other than Wembanyama.
Well, it's not that they're all, but it's also just like the ecosystem needs to be set up in some way to where you're going to get to those lineups, or there needs to be enough spacing around to maximize what he's going to do as an on-ball playmaker. So yeah, I still think that's probably where he needs to improve the most. I might even argue I get more frustrated that I don't feel him on defense as much as I think that you should when you look at what he is capable of. But he is more of a plug and play every level scorer. I firmly believe this, and there's going to be some numbers that don't support this. I firmly believe he is more of a plug and play every level scorer than he has ever been in his career. that's fucking fantastic for the Spurs, because even if you say, well, we still need Wemby to get a second best player, you know what? Your third best player on a really good team is already in place, and there's a huge value in that.
Okay, I think that's fair. I feel like there's a lot of like, when Devin Vassell signed that contract, I think we were like, that's the going rate for what he's going to be. Like, no problem with it. And then I feel like more recently people have kind of been this, it's such a straw man thing, but I felt like the sentiment was kind of like, oh, I don't know if that was a good idea. Keldon Johnson's even too is kind of wild to think about that. The best criticism you can make of Devin Vassell this year, and the only valid one to me, is that he didn't have like a massive breakthrough, because he's gotten better. But I was just curious where you were on it, because I know you're so.
Yeah, but you just tried to get me to be pessimistic about that.
I just know that he's one of your guys, and he didn't turn into like an all NBA level player. Not that you thought that, but that's probably enough on the Spurs. Do I lead the Jazz? I think I do.
Yes, you were on. You take us through the Jazz.
All right. So this is going to go against some of the logic we've used for other teams that are kind of have packed it in this year, where it's like, just try weird stuff and like, let the chips fall. So we both love Keontae George, kind of been in on. I feel like we deserve credit. Maybe you got me there. I can't remember. But
I'm very nervous as to where this discussion is headed.
No, we were in on him. I'm still in on him, and that's the reason I'm going to say this. I think the Jazz need to kind of walk the line a little carefully here, because he's really struggled lately. And he's under 40% from the field in his last 4 games. He's had some ugly like 0 for 6s and 0 for 7s from 3. Turnovers are going up. It's like, I don't really worry about this too much with players whose potential I believe in as much as his, but like, you're in an environment where losing is kind of the point right now. Bad habits could form. You could get kind of, I don't know, disillusioned like down the stretch here. I think he's going to be so good that I'm concerned with just like throw him out there and like experiment around him. Like, I think you still need to do like a little more nurturing. Like maybe that means a little bit, fewer minutes. Maybe that means having him reel it in. Maybe that means supporting him more with other point guards. Like, I don't want this like crazy statistical like downturn at the end of the year to kind of like be the lasting image of his rookie season. So what you can do is just put him on the floor as much as possible with Lauri Markkanen and Walker Kessler, because those units actually win the minutes they play, which is not easy to do with the way Utah has been operating in general. And they've been especially good on D. And maybe this is one of those, like, let's not give up on Walker Kessler, transformative defensive center potentially. That's beside the point. I know, I feel like we need to zag a little bit, because with all these other young cornerstone pieces, we've been like, try weird stuff, sink or swim. Like, there are no stakes. These games don't matter. But with George, it's like some of the numbers have been so ugly of late that I want the Jazz to like take better care of him down the stretch here.
I think I get what you're saying. I can't bring myself to be concerned about him though, because I'm trying to figure out the best way to frame it. Let's do it this way. Who is the 4th most played player on the Jazz during the month of March?
I have no earthly idea.
It's Bryce Sensabaugh. And so that's who I actually liked coming out of the draft. My point is, they have, Larry Markkanen was back in the lineup. What was the last game I saw from them? I think it was, as we're recording this last one, their loss to the Mavericks. So he had played in that one. But like, you're getting to the point of a lot of Taylor Hendricks. Yeah. You're not seeing like Jordan Clarkson's not in the lineup right now. So if you're saying take better care of him by saying, well, let's dispense with trying to keep this pick or worrying about the win-loss standings, and we want to make sure Larry Markkanen is playing a bunch more. Sure. Or Jordan Clarkson is going to be healthy enough to play a bunch more. I totally get that. I don't view it as a lasting impression, in large part because it's like, we all know the deal of what they're doing. We saw it last year. Right. We know what's happening here, but I think that's fair. I will say though, even when he looks bad, I think what he's done a lot better job of is just getting to his spots at the top 2 levels, like the mid-ranger from 3-point range.
Yeah.
And so that gives me hope. I will say that, and I don't know how realistic this goal is, but like, we're seeing more of Taylor Hendricks, which is what I want to see. And by the way, Taylor Hendricks, I know you know this, he's really good. Super malleable on the defensive end. It's like astounding. He will guard Victor Wembanyama. He will also guard Anthony Edwards. That is like some of the highest praise that I could give him. The rim protection instincts are real. He's an alert defender away from the ball. Does get caught up a little bit navigating screens from what I've seen, but he's quick to course correct. Can you guess, Grant, knowing what I told you he can do on defense, can you guess, we're going to play this possession game again, how many possessions has Taylor Hendricks played with both Walker Kessler and Larry Markkinen?
Oh, I bet.
Would you like me to give you an over-under?
Yeah, I was going to say like almost never, but give me the over-under.
I'll give you an over-under of 78.
Under.
Yeah, 72. I don't really know where I was going with that.
That's more than I would have thought, though.
The results have not been good. I want to see more of it because I think what it does is it definitely puts the burden on Hendricks offensively to see, well, can you stretch the floor? What can you do is maybe with the ball in your hands in space? But you really are going to find out more about him defensively by saying, well, you are just our wing defender in this instance. And if it pans out, you know how much easier that makes Larry Markkinen's life defensively? Yeah. So I just want to see more of that. We're already seeing more of Taylor Hendricks. I just don't know how realistic it is to expect, like, how many more games is Larry Markkinen actually going to play in for this team down the stretch?
Hendricks, like, you know, the numbers in general have not been great, but he is kind of an eye test passer, and certainly in flashes from what I've seen.
He is more likely. I won't say. It's a little too spicy. I won't say.
Oh, all right,
he's more likely to develop into a perennial all-star than Keontae George.
Really? You're still that high? Okay, all right. By
the way, and I know Jarris Walker's coming on in Indiana. I still think the Pacers are going to live to loathe that draft day decision.
Hendricks is averaging over a steal and a block and getting up 6 threes per 36 minutes. You'll take that all day from a guy that is going to move around like he does and defend. Like, the percentages are not good, but just like to your point, like you can see the outlines of like, oh, this guy could mark to the great benefit of Markkinen specifically, be an awesome, like just an objectively really impactful player on both ends, but also like for this team, like if you're concerned with the Jazz, we're getting like way into the weeds, but this is the last team, so whatever. If you're concerned with the Jazz, is like, I don't know, Lauri Markkinen's your first option. Like, is that really enough? Because it might be if Hendricks becomes the type of player that some of the numbers suggest and some of the eye test stuff says, and your evaluation of him undoubtedly sets in stone that he might be.
Yeah. I mean, and also, by the way, if we're going to talk about the lineups, if you really want to try and get a real glimpse into the future, you're going to want to see, I mentioned Markkinen, Kessler, and Hendricks. You're going to want to see Keontae George as part of those units. And like now it's okay. Is there enough shooting there? Then is that pushing the boundaries? But we've only seen 46 possessions of those four together. So it's just like, I want to see more of what, when I look at this team, you could talk me into Colin Sexton needing to stay long-term because he's been that good. But I view, unless I'm missing somebody, like those are the four, like just core players. Then maybe whoever they draft, assuming they keep their pick in this year. But can we see like the future four? Like so I just want to see more of that. I don't know how realistic it is, but that's what I want to see.
Yeah, I'm into it.
That's all we've got. We've wrapped it up. The 4 parts, every team, goals, things to monitor, stuff we want to see or might be concerned about. Grant, do you want to take us out of here?
I would love to, Dan. Thanks everybody for listening. Again, thank you for bearing with us, or actually you didn't have to bear with us through anything. This was a very short set of podcasts for us. So thanks for your support. You can continue to do that by rating, reviewing, subscribing, spread the word of mouth, tell your friends, tell your enemies, join our Discord, buy our merch. Links to do both of those things are in the YouTube and podcast description. And as we do, please do the same. Give shouts out to Frank Ntilikina and always apologize to Jared Allen.